The nursery should have held warmth. Stone walls thick enough to blunt winter, furs layered deep, a hearth that never went fully dark. The first pup cried, not hunger, not fear. The sound came low and uneven, scraping its way through the room like something caught where it shouldn't be. The second followed a breath later. Together, the cries pressed outward, servants stilled mid-step. A maid's fingers clenched white around a folded cloth. No one spoke. Sound felt brittle here. Footsteps approached, no announcement. By the time the door opened, shoulders were already squared, spines straightened without instruction. Kyle entered. He did not hurry. His presence filled the room the way night filled a valley, complete, unavoidable. He crossed the floor and stopped at the cradle. 2 infants lay there, dark hair damp against flushed skin, fists tight. The mark at Kyle's throat burned faintly beneath his collar. He reached down. The nearest pup stiffened. The cry sharpened, higher, raw, dragging the second with it. Small bodies arched, voices tearing loose as if pulled from too deep. Kyle's fingers stilled in the air, his jaw set. Enough, he said. The sound did nothing. The cries climbed, clawing against stone until the hearth crackled sharply and someone flinched as if struck. At the far edge of the room, half shadowed by a linen screen, a young maid stood with a tray of folded cloths. The sound hit her chest before it reached her ears. Pressure bloomed beneath her ribs, sudden, disorienting. Her skin tightened. Warmth rushed into her hands. She took a step before she realized she'd moved. The instant her foot crossed the hearth's shadow, the crying stopped. Not softened, gone. Silence rang hard enough to ache. Every head turned. The pups lay still now, eyes open, breathing uneven but quiet, their attention angled, not toward Kyle's hand, not toward the ceiling, toward her. The fire straightened. Kyle looked up. The maid froze. The tray trembled slightly in her grip. For a moment, no one breathed. Then morning came without ceremony. Light slid between the stone ribs of the eastern windows, pale and slow. Dust stirred where servants had crossed before dawn. Kyle had not left his place beside the cradle. He stood as he had been, boots planted, shoulders squared, watching for the cries to return. They did not. The maid remained by the hearth. No one had told her to stay. No one told her to leave. The pups slept, not the shallow, restless doze they had known since birth, but something heavier. Their chests rose together, fell together. A servant cleared his throat near the door. The sound snapped sharp in the stillness. One pup shifted. A breath caught. The maid inhaled, slow, unintentional. The breath of someone grounding herself without knowing why. The stir faded before it could become sound. Kyle's gaze lifted to her. She felt it at once, lowered her eyes. Heat rushed to her cheeks. Her fingers tightened at her waist. No one spoke. The servant withdrew. Time loosened its grip on the room. When one pup finally woke, his cry came sharp and sudden, the second following instantly. Kyle lifted one, too carefully. The small body fought him, fists beating against his chest, voice climbing higher. The other screamed harder. The maid moved, not fast, not rushed. She crossed the stone floor and stopped a careful distance away, too close. She felt it and stilled. The crying faltered. Both pups turned toward her. The one in Kyle's arms sagged, weight shifting as if he'd found a surface that did not resist him. The second's voice thinned, then vanished. Silence returned, fragile, real. Kyle lowered his gaze to the child, then looked at the maid. Up close, she was younger than he remembered. Calloused hands, posture trained into obedience. Dark lashes against skin pale from stone halls and long winters. "Stay," he said. The word carried no force. Her head dipped. Not a bow. Acknowledgement. Yes, my lord. It should have meant nothing. The pups slept on, and whatever choice had been made in the nursery, no one present had intended to make it. Kyle watched them a moment longer, as if waiting for the room to betray itself. It did not. He straightened once, small, controlled, and nodded. "Bring a chair," he said, already turning back toward the cradle. "You'll be staying." The maid did not ask why. She crossed the room quietly, retrieved a chair from the wall and placed it near the hearth, close enough that warmth brushed her knees, far enough that she did not crowd the cradle. She sat, the fire held steady, the pups did not stir, and for the first time since their birth, the Alpha King's twins slept through the hour. The keep adjusted without remark. No decree followed. No instruction passed from mouth to mouth. Still, things shifted. A servant paused at the nursery door before knocking, head tilted, listening. A tray was set down with deliberate care. Voices softened as they crossed the corridor, as though sound itself had learned where it was unwelcome. Lyra stayed where she had been placed. The chair became hers. No one moved it. No one questioned when she was already seated before dawn or still there when the lamps were lit. When she rose, the room followed her movement without knowing it was doing so. She did not claim the space. The space held her anyway. Each morning she arrived before the pups woke. Each night she left only when the lamps burned low and another maid came to keep the fire fed. She did not complain about the hours. She did not ask to be relieved. She learned the twins by weight before name. The heavier one slept longer, but woke angrier. His cries rose sharp and sudden, like a blade drawn too fast. The other stirred earlier, softer, his unrest a gradual pulling tight beneath the skin. Lyra noticed before the sound began, a shift in breath, a tiny tremor in the cradle. She adjusted herself first, back straight, shoulders loose, breathing slow. She did not reach unless the sound crossed a certain line. Often, it never did. Kyle watched. He did not stand over her. He took his place by the windows, arms folded behind his back, gaze angled toward the yard beyond. From there, he could see the nursery reflected faintly in the glass. When one pup whimpered, Lyra did not rush. She leaned forward slightly. Her presence pressed into the space like warmth spreading from stone long held near a flame. The pup settled. Kyle's reflection stilled. By the third day, the wet nurse began to look unsure of her own hands. She would lift a child, bouncing gently, murmuring soft nonsense. The pup's face would crumple. The cry would rise. Lyra would inhale. The cry would falter. Sometimes, the nurse noticed. Sometimes she didn't. When she did, her brow furrowed, not in anger but confusion. Once, she stepped back and let Lyra take the child without being asked. Lyra's arms shook the first time. Not from fear. From the strange certainty that she would succeed. The pup pressed into her as if her body had always been meant for this exact weight, this exact heat. She supported the head carefully, fingers sure beneath the tiny skull. Her scent changed, subtle, clean, something drawn from skin rather than soap. The pup went quiet. The other followed soon after. Kyle turned from the window. "You," he said to the nurse. "Rest." The woman blinked, startled, then obeyed at once. Lyra remained standing, a child in each arm. Her muscles burned. She did not shift her weight. Kyle approached slowly. He stopped close, closer than before. He could feel the warmth coming off her skin, steady and unafraid. The pups slept against her chest, their breathing shallow and even. "Sit," he said. She did. The chair creaked softly. Kyle watched the rise and fall of the twins' chests, watched the way Lyra's body compensated instinctively, one shoulder dipping, a forearm adjusting, a minute shift so neither child slipped or strained. He felt something tighten low in his ribs, not anger, not relief, something else. Later, in the council chamber, voices rose. They cannot rely on a maid. It sets a precedent. Others will notice. Kyle listened without interruption. When the room went quiet, he stood. "They sleep," he said, "nothing more." The discussion did not resume. Word traveled anyway. Guards began to linger near the nursery longer than necessary. Servants glanced at Lyra, when they thought she wouldn't see. Some eyes sharpened, others softened. One afternoon, as the light slanted low and gold through the windows, a young guard lingered in the doorway. He watched Lyra hum softly under her breath. Not a song, not quite, just a pattern she used when the twins stirred restlessly. "Did you train for that?" he asked. The sound startled her. She stopped humming at once. The pups shifted, but did not wake. "No," she said quietly. The guard tilted his head. "Then how?" Kyle's voice cut through the room. "Leave." The guard stiffened and retreated, cheeks flushed. Silence settled again. Lyra's pulse thundered. She had not seen Kyle approach. He stood near the cradle now, gaze fixed not on her but on the twins. "They respond to you," he said. She lowered her eyes. "They're children, my lord." They responded before they could choose. Her throat tightened. "I don't do anything," she said. "I just stay." Kyle considered her profile, the line of her jaw, the faint mark of an old scar near her temple she had never bothered to hide. He nodded once. That night, when the heavier twin woke screaming, louder than before, body rigid with distress, Kyle reached the cradle first. The cry intensified. Lyra was across the room, rising too quickly from her chair. Kyle hesitated. It was brief, a fraction of a second. In that space the pup's scream broke, cracking into sobs. Lyra stopped moving. Kyle's hands steadied. The pup quieted. Kyle exhaled slowly, surprised by the sound of it. He did not look at Lyra, but he did not step away from the cradle either. And for the first time, the pup slept with Kyle standing watch, and Lyra still breathing softly behind him, neither dismissed, neither sent away. The first crack showed itself at dawn. Lyra felt it before she understood it. She woke with a tightness behind her eyes, a low ache beneath her ribs that had nothing to do with hunger or sleep. The keep was still dark when she dressed, the stone cold under her bare feet. She paused before tying her apron, fingers lingering at the knot as if hesitating might change something. It didn't. By the time she reached the nursery, the twins were already stirring, not crying, not yet, restless. Their breaths were uneven. Small limbs shifted against the blankets. The air itself felt thicker, like a room just before a storm breaks. Lyra sat. She drew one slow breath. Nothing settled. Her chest tightened. She tried again, slower, deeper. The rhythm she had come to rely on, the one her body seemed to remember even when her mind wandered. The twins whimpered. Her heart stuttered. Behind her, footsteps entered the room. Kyle. He stopped short when he saw her expression. "What is it?" he asked. "I don't know," she said before she could stop herself. Her voice sounded wrong to her own ears, too thin, too unsure. The heavier twin's cry rose suddenly, sharp and unrestrained. The other followed a heartbeat later, their voices colliding, feeding each other. Kyle moved to the cradle at once. Lyra stayed seated, her hands trembled in her lap. Kyle lifted one child, then the other, turning instinctively toward her, and stopped. She was still sitting, still breathing, still here, but something in her posture had shifted. Her shoulders were drawn too tight, her breathing shallow, uneven. The twins screamed louder. Kyle adjusted his hold, jaw tightening as he tried to steady them. Their small bodies strained against him, fists beating uselessly against his chest. "Lyra," he said. Her name landed heavy between them. She forced herself to stand. The floor seemed farther away than usual, her legs slow to obey. She crossed the room, each step deliberate, as if moving too fast might shatter whatever fragile calm still hovered near the ceiling. She stopped close, too close. The pup's cries wavered, but did not stop. Lyra swallowed. Her breath refused to deepen. Her chest burned. Kyle noticed. He shifted, angling the twins slightly away from her, as if shielding them from something unseen. The movement cut deeper than any word. Lyra stepped back at once. "I'm sorry," she said too quickly. "I didn't—" "Leave," Kyle said. The word was quiet, final. Her stomach dropped. She bowed her head, hands clenching at her sides, and turned toward the door. Each step felt heavier than the last, her ears ringing with the sound of the twins' cries growing sharper behind her. She reached the threshold. One cry broke, then the other, not quiet, not calm, but no longer spiraling. Lyra stopped. She did not turn. Behind her, Kyle breathed out slowly, the sound rough, dragged from somewhere deep in his chest. "Wait," he said. She froze. He came closer, not rushing, not slow. Just enough that she could feel his presence behind her, solid as the stone walls themselves. "What changed?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know." The truth pressed up in her throat, unwanted and unformed. "I was afraid," she said finally, "that it would stop, that I wouldn't know how to make it right again." Silence stretched. The pup's cries softened into hiccuping breaths. Kyle spoke behind her. "You don't make it right," he said. "You don't do anything." Her hands tightened. "Then why does it work?" Kyle did not answer. Instead, he stepped past her and returned to the cradle. He lowered the twins carefully, one after the other. They stirred but did not scream. Their breaths caught, then eased. Lyra turned back slowly. Kyle stood over the cradle longer than necessary, shoulders tense, gaze fixed. "You stay," he said at last, "when they need you." Her chest ached. "And when they don't?" she asked softly. He looked at her then, really looked. "You stay anyway." Something in his voice made her throat close. Days followed like that, not smooth, not easy. There were moments when Lyra's presence no longer settled the twins at once. Moments when Kyle reached for them first without looking to her. Moments when servants watched too closely, whispers threading through corridors like fine wire. Once, during a meal, a woman at the far end of the table laughed softly and said, "It's only habit. They'll grow out of it." Kyle's hand tightened around his cup until the metal groaned faintly. Lyra kept her eyes on her plate. That night, one of the twins woke screaming again, harder than before, body rigid, breath coming too fast. Lyra rose from her chair and stopped. Kyle was already there. He lifted the child with practiced care, pressing the small body close. He inhaled slowly, deeply, just as Lyra always did. The scream faltered, then stopped. Kyle blinked. The room went very still. He looked down at the sleeping pup in his arms, then at the other twin, who had settled without stirring. Lyra watched from across the room, heart pounding. Kyle held the child a moment longer than necessary. Then he looked up at her. Their eyes met. No triumph, no fear, just recognition. Lyra exhaled shakily. The bond between them, unspoken, unclaimed, pulled tighter, not easing, not breaking, waiting. It happened in front of everyone, not during a crisis, not in secrecy, not with raised voices or drawn steel. It happened in the middle of the day, with the keep wide awake. The twins had been brought into the outer hall for the first time. Sunlight spilled across the stone floor in broad bands. Banners stirred faintly overhead. Courtiers filled the space in loose clusters, voices low, curious, restrained. This was meant to be simple. A showing, a reassurance. Lyra stood where she always did now, 3 steps behind the cradle bearers, close enough to feel the change in air when the twins shifted, far enough to remind herself she did not belong at the center. Kyle walked ahead. His pace was steady, measured. Every eye followed him. At first the twins slept. Their faces were peaceful, mouths slack, lashes casting faint shadows on flushed cheeks. A murmur rippled through the hall. Approval, relief, something like pride. Then a sharp sound rang out, metal striking stone. The noise cut clean and sudden through the space. The heavier twin startled violently. His cry tore out of him without warning. loud, raw, echoing off the high ceiling. The second followed at once, their distress feeding on itself, spiraling. The murmur collapsed into uneasy silence. Kyle stopped. The cradle-bearers faltered, exchanging quick glances. Kyle turned and reached for the twins. He lifted one, then the other, pulling them close, shoulders squaring as he drew in a slow breath. The cries did not ease. They sharpened. Kyle tried again, adjusting his hold, rocking subtly, lowering his voice, though he said nothing at all. The twins screamed harder. The sound scraped along the stone, crawling into the ribs of everyone present. Lyra felt it hit her chest like a blow. Her breath caught. Without thinking, she stepped forward. A hand shot out, blocked her path. A senior steward stood between her and the cradle, face tight, eyes flicking nervously to Kyle. "Not now," he murmured under his breath. "This isn't your place." Lyra froze. The twins' cries climbed higher. Kyle looked up. He saw the steward's hand. He saw Lyra standing still behind it, her shoulders drawn tight, breath shallow, eyes fixed on the children. For the first time, Kyle hesitated openly. It lasted only a moment. But the room felt it. He took one step back. The cries did not stop. The cradle-bearers shifted uncomfortably. Whispers sparked along the walls. She shouldn't be here. This was a mistake. They depend too much. The steward tightened his grip on Lyra's arm. She winced, but did not pull away. Kyle moved. Not toward the twins, toward them. "Let her pass," he said. The steward stiffened. "My lord." Kyle did not raise his voice. He did not repeat himself. The steward released her at once. Lyra stepped forward. The instant she crossed the space between herself and the twins, something changed. Not silence. Not yet. But the pitch of the cries shifted, broke unevenly. Kyle watched it happen. Lyra reached the cradle and stopped. She did not take the children. She did not touch them. She placed one hand against the edge of the cradle, fingers splayed, grounding herself against the cool stone. She breathed, low, steady. The twins' cries cracked, fell. One collapsed into wet, broken sobs. The other's voice thinned to a fragile whimper, then quiet. A hush dropped over the hall so complete it felt physical. Kyle stood very still. Around them, no one moved. Lyra's knees trembled. She leaned subtly into the cradle, holding herself upright with effort. Her pulse roared in her ears. She did not look at Kyle. She did not look at anyone. She stayed where she was. After a long moment, Kyle stepped forward. He did not reclaim the twins. He placed his hand over Lyra's, briefly, firmly, where it rested on the cradle. Gasps whispered through the hall. The steward stared. Kyle did not look at him. "Clear the hall," Kyle said. No one argued. Courtiers withdrew. Servants moved quickly, efficiently, eyes downcast. The banners stilled as doors shut, one by one, until only Kyle, Lyra, and the twins remained beneath the high ceiling. When they were alone, Kyle removed his hand. "You didn't hesitate," he said. She swallowed. "I did." He shook his head once. "Not when it mattered." Her throat tightened. "I was afraid. So was I." The admission hung between them, heavy and irrevocable. Lyra finally looked at him. Kyle looked back. Not as ruler, not as master, as someone standing at the edge of something already changed. "You can't stay hidden," he said quietly. Her heart dropped. "I never asked to. I know." He glanced down at the twins, now sleeping again, bodies loose with trust. "They will grow," he said. "They will remember." Her voice shook. "I don't want to take anything from them." Kyle's gaze hardened, not at her, but at the empty doors, the unseen eyes beyond them. "They already chose," he said, "long before anyone else did." Silence wrapped the hall. Lyra stood beside him, not beneath, not behind, beside, and there was no returning to how it had been before. The keep did not celebrate. There were no bells, no feasting. No words passed along corridors to explain what had happened in the outer hall. People adjusted instead, silently, instinctively, like bodies finding a new balance after the ground has shifted. Lyra noticed it first in the smallest ways. The chair by the hearth was never moved again. When she entered a room, servants stepped aside without being told. Not hurriedly, not fearfully, simply, correctly. Food trays arrived at the nursery on time, always warm. Water was refreshed before it cooled. No one reminded her of her duties anymore. She still worked. She still cleaned, still folded linens, still rose before dawn. But no one corrected her. The twins grew. Their cries softened into fussing. Their small hands learned her shape, the curve of her collarbone, the fabric of her sleeves, the steady rhythm beneath her skin. They reached for her without looking. Kyle watched this happen without interference. He no longer hovered. He did not test the room by stepping in first. Sometimes when the twins stirred, he did nothing at all, just remained where he was, hands relaxed at his sides, trusting the quiet before it broke. Often, it never did. On the morning the pups first shifted fully, ears lengthening, small claws dimpling the blankets. It was Lyra who noticed before sound formed. She felt it like pressure behind her eyes. She stood at once. Kyle was already awake, already watching. The pups did not cry. They made small, confused sounds, curious, uncertain, searching. Lyra knelt beside the cradle. Her fingers brushed the air above them, hesitant. Kyle nodded once. She touched them. The change settled. That afternoon the council gathered again. Lyra was not summoned. She stood in the doorway anyway, carrying clean cloths, stopping when she realized the room had gone quiet. She began to step back. Kyle turned. "No," he said. She froze. "Stay." She did. The council members looked at her, then away. No one challenged her presence. No one questioned why her hands did not tremble as she folded the cloths on the table's edge. When the meeting ended, no one dismissed her. No one had to. That night, the twins slept between them, not in a cradle, not guarded. Lyra lay stiff at first, afraid to move, every breath measured so she would not disturb them. One small hand rested against her wrist. The other pup pressed against Kyle's side, feet tucked beneath his ribs. Kyle shifted carefully, drawing the furs higher. His fingers brushed Lyra's. Accidentally, he did not pull away. Neither did she. They stayed like that until the fire burned low and the keep settled fully into sleep. In the weeks that followed, nothing dramatic happened, and everything changed. Lyra was given quarters closer to the nursery. No announcement marked the move. Her name began to be spoken without sharpness, without pity. Once, a guard bowed to her without realizing it. He flushed and straightened quickly, but he did not apologize. Kyle spent more time in the nursery than anywhere else, not commanding, observing, learning. One evening, as the twins slept, Kyle stopped beside Lyra's chair. "You should rest," he said. She looked up at him. "I'm not tired." He studied her face in the firelight. "Then stay," he said. She did. Later, long after the twins' breathing deepened into true sleep, Kyle reached out, not to claim, to ask. He placed his hand over hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. She inhaled sharply, did not pull away. He did not speak. He did not need to. She turned her hand, just enough to meet his. Their fingers aligned naturally, as if this had always been the correct shape. No vows were spoken, no promises made. The keep held them quietly, stone and flame bearing witness without judgment. By morning, nothing looked different, but everyone felt it. The twins woke calm. The halls felt steadier. And Lyra's place, no longer hidden, no longer questioned, was exactly where it had always been meant to be. The twins learned to recognize the sound of Lyra's steps before anything else, not her scent, not her voice, her steps. They quieted when her weight crossed the threshold. Even before she entered the room, their movements softened beneath the blankets, as if something in them listened outward. The nurse noticed first. She paused one morning, bowl in hand, watching as the twins stirred, tiny fists tightening, breath hitching just enough to warn of what came next. Lyra hadn't spoken. She hadn't even reached the cradle. She was only there. The pups settled. The nurse frowned at her own hands. Later that week, one of the twins bit down hard for the first time. It startled everyone. A sharp cry, more from surprise than pain, rang through the nursery. Blood welled quickly, bright and sudden against skin too new to understand consequence. Kyle was there at once. So was Lyra. She moved slower, not because she hesitated, because she knew she didn't need to rush. The twin whimpered, confused by his own strength, his ears half shifted, small claws dimpling the air. Lyra knelt. She took his hand gently, turned it palm up, and pressed her thumb, not to the wound, but to his wrist. Her breath dropped low. The crying stopped. The other twin leaned toward her instinctively, cheek brushing her sleeve. Kale watched the blood bead and slow. He said nothing. He did not need to. That evening rain came down hard, not the polite kind that whispered against the keep's high windows, but the heavy, insistent sort that drummed on stone and rattled old frames. Thunder rolled close. The twins woke together, startled, breath sharp and uneven. Lyra was already there. She gathered them both, settling back against the low cushions near the hearth, their bodies pressed warm and solid against her, each finding its own place. Kale stood nearby, arms folded loosely. The thunder cracked again. Neither twin cried. Instead, one reached out blindly, fingers catching in Lyra's hair. The other pressed his face into her collarbone, breathing fast, then slower. Kyle watched the way she adjusted, how she didn't still them, didn't hush them, didn't try to convince them there was nothing to fear. She let them feel it, and let it pass. Later, when the storm moved on, and the keep sighed into damp quiet, Kyle spoke from the doorway. "You don't pretend with them." Lyra shook her head slightly. "They'd know," he nodded. That was all. The first time someone challenged her presence directly, it wasn't loud. It happened in the corridor. A woman, older, sharp-eyed, stopped Lyra. She carried fresh linens toward the nursery. "You're becoming visible," the woman said, voice even. Lyra adjusted her grip on the cloth. "I'm working." The woman's gaze flicked to the nursery door. "Be careful." Lyra met her eyes. "I am." The woman studied her a moment longer, then stepped aside. She did not repeat the warning. One night, much later, Kyle did not leave. He remained after the lamps were lowered, after the keep went quiet, after the servants withdrew into shadow. The twins slept between them again, heavier now, limbs less careful. Kyle sat on the edge of the pallet, back against the wall. Lyra lay beside the children, one hand resting lightly on each small back. At some point her breathing slowed. Kyle noticed the instant she drifted. Her body softened, not collapsing, not surrendering, just trusting the room enough to rest. A twin stirred. Kyle shifted without thinking. He placed his palm between the child's shoulders, steady and warm. The pup settled. Lyra didn't wake. Kyle stayed like that for a long time. When dawn began to pale the edges of the window, he finally moved, careful, precise, so he could lie back fully. His shoulder brushed Lyra's. She didn't pull away. She didn't lean in either. They remained exactly as they were. Correct. On the day the twins laughed, properly laughed, sharp and delighted, voices breaking free in sound rather than need, half the keep stopped moving. It wasn't planned. Lyra had been crouched on the floor, showing them how light scattered through a chipped piece of colored glass she'd found near the outer wall. The twins reached. The light danced. They laughed. The sound carried. Kale heard it from the stairwell. He stopped where he was, closed his eyes, and breathed. Nothing was announced. No new titles were given. No doors were formally opened. But when Lyra walked beside Kyle through the keep now, no one stepped between them. And when the twins were restless, the room turned, without instruction, toward the place where Lyra stood, toward the quiet, toward what held, and that was how it stayed, not because it was declared, but because nothing else fit. The first thing that went wrong was that the twins stopped reaching for Lyra and reached past her instead. It happened just after dawn. The nursery was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually meant safety. Pale light lay across the floor. The fire had burned low but steady through the night. Lyra was seated where she always was, close enough to feel the warmth from the cradle, far enough not to crowd. One twin stirred. She leaned forward without thinking, arms already opening, body preparing for the familiar weight. The child did not come to her. His gaze slid past her shoulder. His small hand lifted, uncertain at first, then insistently, toward the open space near the door. The other twin followed, restless, breath-catching, attention pulled in the same direction. Lyra froze. Her arms lowered slowly, carefully, as if the movement itself might startle them. Her heart thudded once hard, then again. Footsteps sounded behind her. Kyle had not spoken. He had not entered loudly. He was simply there. The twins' agitation eased the instant he crossed the threshold. Their bodies settled. One made a small sound, not distress, not hunger, something expectant. Kyle stopped. He felt it immediately, the way the room had shifted before he touched anything. Lyra remained still. She did not look at him. Kyle stepped closer to the cradle. Both twins turned toward him fully now, arms lifting, fingers flexing clumsily in the air, not crying, not frightened, choosing. Kyle's breath slowed. He reached out. The twins quieted completely. Lyra felt the absence like a hollow opening behind her ribs. She stood. The floor felt unsteady beneath her feet, though nothing had moved. She took one step back, then another, making space without being asked. Kyle noticed. His hands hovered over the cradle, unsure for the first time in weeks where to settle. He glanced at Lyra. Just once. She kept her gaze on the children. "They're growing," she said softly. It wasn't reassurance. It wasn't explanation. It was a fact that didn't ask permission. Kyle nodded. The twins shifted again, attention flickering, no longer fixed, no longer singular. Their focus moved between them now, restless, searching, as if something new had begun to pull. Outside the nursery, the keep woke. Doors opened. Voices traveled. The day took shape. Inside, nothing was resolved. And for the first time since the twins were born, the room did not know who it would settle for. By midday, the twins would not sleep, not truly. They drifted, eyes half-lidded, bodies slack, only to stir again moments later, small sounds catching in their throats, as if something kept calling them back to wakefulness. Lyra noticed the pattern before anyone else, not the waking, the timing. They always stirred just before Kyle left the room. The first time it happened, she told herself it meant nothing. Kyle rose from the low bench near the wall, adjusting his cloak, movements unhurried. He crossed toward the door, boots quiet against the stone. The twins shifted, one hand reached. Missed. A soft sound escaped. Questioning, unsettled. Kyle paused. The sound faded. He waited a breath longer than necessary before leaving. The second time, he did not pause. The sound became a cry, not sharp, not desperate, insistent. Kyle stopped mid-step, shoulders tightening as if a tether had gone taut behind him. Lyra stood slowly. She did not rush to the cradle. She did not breathe the way she usually did. The twins' cries climbed, uneven, overlapping, threaded with confusion more than fear. Kyle turned back. The instant he stepped closer, the cries broke apart, then fell away entirely. Silence rushed in to fill the space. Lyra felt it settle on her skin like cold ash. Kyle stood over the cradle, hands resting on the rim, head bowed slightly. The twins watched him now with a focus that felt too sharp for their age. "You didn't touch them," Lyra said. Kyle looked up. "No," he replied. The word carried weight neither of them named. By evening, others had noticed. It showed in the way conversations trailed off when Kyle entered a room, in how servants lingered just outside doorways longer than before, pretending to busy themselves with tasks already complete. A guard approached Lyra in the corridor near the western stairs. "You should come quickly," he said, voice low. "The children—" She was already moving. The nursery was crowded when she arrived, too crowded. The wet nurse stood near the cradle, face flushed, arms tense with effort. Another servant hovered uselessly nearby, hands wringing together. The twins cried loudly now, full-voiced, strained, bodies rigid. Kyle stood apart. He had not touched them. Lyra felt that absence like a wrong note. She crossed the room. No one stopped her. She reached the cradle and knelt, heart pounding, breath too fast. She gathered one twin up, then froze. The child's body stayed stiff. The crying did not ease. Her chest tightened. She adjusted her hold, turning slightly, trying again to settle into the familiar rhythm. Nothing. The other twin cried harder. Lyra's vision blurred. She swallowed, forcing her breath lower, slower. She rocked gently, grounding herself against the floor beneath her knees. The crying wavered, not stopped, but softened. Kyle moved then. He stepped closer, not crowding, not taking over. He placed one hand against the cradle, palm flat. The second twin's cry broke into hiccuping breaths. Lyra felt it happen. Not relief. Displacement. She drew in a careful breath and held it. Kyle reached out and took the child from her arms. The twin quieted almost instantly. The room exhaled. Lyra remained kneeling. No one spoke. Kyle looked down at the child, then back at Lyra. Something unreadable passed across his face. Too quick to hold, too real to ignore. "You should rest," he said. She stood slowly. "I'm fine." He hesitated. "Just long enough. I'll send for you if they need you," he added. She nodded, left. Her hands shook all the way down the corridor. That night, Lyra did not sleep. She sat on the edge of her pallet, hands clasped together, staring at the place where the wall met the floor. The stone felt colder than usual, the silence sharper. She tried to breathe the way she always had. Her body refused. Somewhere far above her, a child cried once, short, startled, then quieted, not by her. She lay back at last, eyes open. For the first time in months, she felt unnecessary. Morning brought no clarity. The twins slept late, heavy and untroubled. Kyle remained with them longer than usual, seated close, one hand resting against the cradle as if to steady himself as much as them. When Lyra entered, the room shifted, not badly, not well. Kyle straightened. The twins stirred. Their eyes tracked between the two of them now, uncertain, curious, as if testing the space. Kyle noticed. So did Lyra. Neither said a word. Later, in the yard below, voices rose, not shouting, arguing, muted, contained, but sharp enough to draw attention. Lyra stood by the nursery window, watching figures gather, members of the council, guards, a few senior servants. Their heads leaned together, gestures cut precise shapes through the air. Kyle joined them minutes later. Lyra stayed behind. She could not hear what was said. She did not need to. When Kyle returned, his expression had not changed, but his shoulders sat differently, tension lodged between them. "They want to bring others," he said, stopping near the cradle. Lyra turned. "Others? People trained for this," he replied. "People who know how to shape behavior, reinforce attachments." The words landed quietly. He watched her face as he spoke. Lyra's fingers curled into her palm. "And if they don't need it?" she asked. Kyle's jaw tightened. "They think it's better not to risk it." Silence stretched. The twins slept on. Lyra looked down at them, at their peaceful faces, at the way one hand rested open against the blanket, fingers relaxed. "They're not confused," she said softly. "They're listening." Kyle met her gaze. "So am I." The room held them there, two truths pulling against each other, neither willing to yield. Outside, the keep moved on. Inside, something waited, and no one knew yet what it would ask for. The strangers arrived at dusk. They did not wear cloaks marked by rank. No insignia announced them. They came quietly, traveling light, boots clean despite the road. They carried nothing in their hands. Lyra saw them first from the upper corridor. 3 figures crossed the inner gate just as the light thinned into evening. Their movements were calm, unhurried. They did not look around as if lost. They walked like people who expected the keep to make room. Her chest tightened. She did not turn away. By the time they reached the nursery doors, the twins were awake, not crying, watching. Their eyes tracked the strangers with unsettling focus, small bodies still as if listening too closely. Lyra stood near the cradle, one hand resting on the stone rim, the other loose at her side. Kael entered behind them. The air changed with his arrival. The strangers inclined their heads, not deeply, not dismissively, enough to acknowledge presence without surrendering. The tallest of them stepped forward. "You asked for help," he said. Kael did not answer at once. The man's gaze drifted, to the cradle, to the twins, then to Lyra. His eyes lingered there a fraction too long. Lyra felt it like a brush of cold along her spine. "They're sensitive," the man continued. "It's normal. Bonds shift. Children adapt." Kael's jaw flexed. "They're calm," Kael said. "For now." The twins stirred. One made a small sound, curious, uncertain. Lyra inhaled. The sound softened. The man noticed. His head tilted slightly. "Interesting," he murmured. Kael stepped forward. "No," he said. The word landed solidly. The man regarded him for a moment, then nodded. "Of course. We observe first." They did not wait for permission. They positioned themselves around the room, not blocking exits, not crowding the cradle, present without being intrusive, skilled enough to look harmless. The twins' attention fractured. Their breaths grew uneven. Lyra felt it immediately. She shifted closer to the cradle, grounding herself against it, breath lowering. Her focus narrowed to the children, the way their fingers tightened, the way their ears flicked restlessly. One of the strangers hummed, soft, low, meant to soothe. The twins startled. The sound wasn't wrong. It just wasn't hers. Their voices rose together, sharp. Kael moved at once. Lyra reached for the twins and stopped. The man raised one hand, palm outward. "Give them a moment," he said gently. Kael hesitated. Only once. The crying climbed. Lyra felt it crest inside her chest, pressure building fast. She did not think. She did not ask. She stepped between Kael and the cradle. The strangers stilled. She placed both hands on the stone rim and breathed, not slowly, deep. The twins' cries cracked and fell apart, leaving broken sobs behind. One reached toward her blindly. The other pressed his face into the blanket, breath hitching. Quiet followed, heavy. The man lowered his hand. His expression had changed. "You didn't teach them calm," he said. "You're anchoring it." Lyra did not look at him. Kael did. "That's enough," Kael said. The man studied them. First Lyra, then Kael, then the twins. "They won't choose only one forever," he said. "That's not how this works." Kael's voice was low. "Leave." The strangers did not argue. They withdrew with measured steps, eyes alert, minds already rearranging what they had seen. When the doors closed behind them, the room sagged. Lyra's knees weakened. She caught herself on the cradle edge, breathing hard now, the effort finally landing. Kael moved to her without thinking. He stopped just short of touching her. "You didn't wait," he said. Her voice shook. "They didn't need me to." He nodded. The twins slept again, too deeply, too fast. That night, Kyle did not leave the nursery. Neither did Lyra. They sat on opposite sides of the room, the distance between them charged, neither willing to cross it yet. Outside, the keep whispered. People had seen enough to ask questions they were careful not to voice. Inside, something had been confirmed, not about the twins, about what could no longer be undone. And somewhere beyond the walls, those who had been sent away began to decide how far they were willing to push back. The next days did not bring confrontation. They brought distance. The twins slept longer with Kyle now nearby, but not settled, their bodies relaxed without fully yielding, breath never dropping as deep as before. Lyra noticed the difference in the way one foot twitched even in rest, the way small sounds gathered but never quite escaped. They were waiting. For something. For someone. Lyra kept her place by the cradle, but she no longer reached without being needed. She watched instead, listened, adjusted herself to the room rather than the children. Kyle noticed that too. He said nothing. At meals, chairs were placed closer together without discussion. At council gatherings, Kyle's focus drifted more often toward the nursery wing than the table. When decisions were delayed, no one pressed him. People sensed the change without naming it. One evening, a bell rang unexpectedly, not the warning bell, the receiving bell. Lyra froze mid-step in the corridor. The sound traveled through the keep with a deliberate weight, echoing off stone meant to remember. Kyle emerged from the stairwell below. They met halfway. "They've come back," he said. "Not who, just they." Lyra nodded once. Her mouth felt dry. "They won't stop," she said. "No." They walked together toward the nursery. Inside, the twins were awake, watching the door. The sound of approaching footsteps reached them, steady, practiced, multiple. The twins stirred sharply both at once, breath spiking, fingers clawing at the blankets. Lyra did not move. Kyle stopped beside her. The doors opened. The same three entered, but not alone. More followed. Not many. Enough. The tall man spoke again, his voice careful now. "This doesn't need to be a struggle." Kyle did not answer. One of the twins cried out, loud, broken, frightened. The other followed, sound thin and frantic. Lyra stepped forward. The man raised his hand again. "Not you." The twins' cries rose higher. Kyle felt it then. Not anger, not fear, decision. He moved. He crossed the room in 2 strides and stood beside Lyra. Not in front of her. Beside. His presence hit the room like a held breath released. "Touch nothing," he said. The man hesitated. The twins' cries cracked, wavered. Lyra placed her palm flat against the cradle. Kyle placed his hand over hers. Together. The sound collapsed. Not gently. Suddenly, silence rushed in so fast it left the room ringing. The twins slept, deep, unreachable. Every eye fixed on their joined hands. No one spoke, no one moved. The tall man broke the stillness first. "This binds more than them," he said quietly. Kyle did not look away from the cradle. "I know. You'll force the world to choose." Kyle lifted his hand from Lyra's. The twins did not wake. "Good," he said. "The strangers left." This time, no one watched them go. That night, Lyra did not return to her quarters. No one asked her to. She slept on the pallet near the cradle, the twins breathing steady and strong, their dreams untroubled at last. Kyle remained seated against the wall, awake. At dawn, Lyra stirred. She sat up slowly. Kyle was still there. "You should have told me," she said softly. "I didn't want you to carry it alone," he replied. She looked down at the twins. "I wasn't," he nodded. Outside, the keep woke into a new shape, not louder, not softer, just different. And this time, everyone felt it. The first change was not in the twins. It was in the keep. Servants began taking longer routes through the corridors, not avoiding the nursery exactly, just passing it with quieter steps, softer hands. Guards rotated more often near the inner wing. No one posted them there, yet they came anyway, as if the stone itself had suggested it. Lyra noticed everything. She always had. The twins woke at the same hour each morning now, not crying, watching. Their eyes followed sound before it reached them, turning toward doorways seconds before footsteps appeared. When Kyle entered, both stilled, not in fear, not in excitement, recognition. They reached for him less, but when they did, they reached with certainty. Kyle felt it in his bones. "They're listening to something," he said one morning, standing beside the cradle. Lyra did not look up from where she sat, braiding a loose thread back into a blanket. "They always were. Not like this." She paused, considered, then nodded. "They're hearing beyond us." That night, the dream came, not to Lyra, to Kyle. He stood in a wide, pale space without walls. The twins were there, older than they were meant to be, walking ahead of him without looking back. Every step they took left marks, light pressed into the ground, deep and deliberate. Ahead, something shifted, not a creature. A gathering. When Kyle woke, his hand was clenched around empty air. The twins slept on. Lyra was awake. "You felt it too," she said. He did not ask how she knew. Yes, they weren't afraid. No, that frightened him more. The council demanded audience 3 days later, not formally, collectively. They gathered in the hall without summons, voices low but firm, faces pulled tight with a concern that did not bother to disguise itself as loyalty. Kyle stood. Lyra remained seated near the back, the twins with a watcher in the adjoining room. "Awake, alert. You're drawing attention," one elder said carefully. "I exist," Kyle replied. "This is different." "Yes." A pause. "What are they?" another asked. Kyle did not answer. Eyes shifted. Someone finally looked toward Lyra. Not openly, but enough. She felt it, rose, spoke. "They're children," she said, "and they know when they're being discussed like property." Silence snapped across the hall. Kyle turned to her sharply, not in warning, in surprise. She met his gaze without flinching. The elder cleared his throat. "You presume they sleep when I touch them," Lyra continued. "They wake when danger comes near. They listen when lies are spoken. If you're afraid of that, then be honest about why." No one had an answer that could stand upright. The council dispersed without resolution. That night the twins spoke, not words, sounds, low humming tones that resonated through their chests and into the walls. The stones answered, not audibly but with warmth, with a subtle tightening that made the keep feel awake. Lyra held one child. Kyle held the other. The sound deepened. Somewhere beyond the borders, something turned its attention fully toward the keep, not curious anymore, interested. When the humming stopped, both twins fell asleep immediately. Kyle did not. Lyra did at dawn. A rider arrived, dust-covered, breathless, borders breached, he said. "Not soldiers, observers. They're not hiding." Kyle nodded once. "Prepare." The rider hesitated. "Prepare? What, my lord?" Kyle looked toward the nursery door. "Welcome," he said. They arrived without banners. That was the first insult. No horns, no ritual challenge, no declaration carved into air or earth. Just figures at the far edge of the territory, standing where the forest thinned and the road bent, visible, patient, unconcerned with whether they were acknowledged. Observers. Kyle watched from the high balcony as dawn burned the mist away. "They want us to look first," he said. Lyra stood beside him, closer than court custom allowed, the stone cold beneath her bare feet. She had not slept. Neither had the twins. "They already know what they're looking at," she replied, as if summoned by her voice. The nursery door behind them creaked softly. A soundless insistence, Kyle turned. No, Lyra didn't argue. She simply walked inside. The twins were standing in their crib, not wobbling, standing, small hands gripping the rail, eyes bright and fixed, not on Lyra, not on Kyle, but on the window. On the direction of the forest, they hummed again, lower than before. More focused, the air tightened. Kyle crossed the room in 3 strides and lifted one child, then the other. The humming did not stop. It travelled through his arms, down his spine, into the floor. The keep answered, this time audibly. A low sound, stone settling, beams flexing, old magic shifting its weight like a beast deciding whether to rise. Lyra inhaled sharply. They recognized the land, she said, not the crown. Kyle looked at her. What does that mean? She placed her hand on the wall. It means the land recognizes them. Outside, wolves howled. Not in warning, in alignment. The observers crossed the boundary at noon, 5 of them, clothed plainly, unarmed, each step measured, respectful, and entirely unafraid. The guards let them through, not because they were ordered to, but because their bodies refused to move when the group passed. Kyle met them in the lower courtyard. The twins were not with him. Lyra was. That alone drew attention. You are not what we expected, the lead observer said, voice even, eyes old. Kyle smiled without warmth. Then you underestimated the world. The observer's gaze shifted, not to the Alpha, but to Lyra. Something changed, a recalibration. You, the observer said slowly, are out of place. Lyra did not bow. No, she agreed. You are. Silence rippled through the courtyard. The observer tilted his head. You smell of claim. Kyle's hand tightened at his side. Lyra answered before he could. I was never claimed. I was allowed. The word allowed landed harder than any threat. Another observer frowned. The children. You will not speak of them, Kyle said, voice dropping. The air responded, pressing inward. The observers did not resist. They adjusted. We came because the land moved, the leader said, because the line that marks inheritance bent instead of breaking. Lyra's breath caught, not loudly. Internally. Kyle felt it. Say it plainly, he commanded. The observer nodded. The twins are not anomalies, they are continuations. Of what? Kyle demanded. The observer's eyes returned to Lyra. Of correction. The word rippled outward. The wolves beyond the walls went silent. Stone stilled. Even the wind paused, as if listening. Lyra swallowed. Correction of what? She asked. The observer hesitated. For the first time since arriving, of a hierarchy built without listening. Kyle laughed. Once. Sharp. Careful. But Lyra felt the truth settle into her bones like weight finding its proper place. The observer stepped back, placing a hand over his chest. You were never meant to be invisible, he said to her. You were meant to be ignored, until the cost became unbearable. Kyle moved between them instantly. That's enough. The observer inclined his head. We will leave, he said. For now. When do you return? Kyle asked. The man's eyes flicked upward, to the nursery window, where 2 small silhouettes pressed close to the glass. When they call, he answered. The observers turned and walked away, not chased, not escorted. The moment they crossed the boundary, the land exhaled. Lyra's knees nearly gave out. Kyle caught her, not as Alpha, as anchor. They're connected to you, he said quietly. She nodded, tears burning but unshed. And you're standing between. He looked down at her, something raw and resolved in his gaze. Then we adapt, he said. All of us. Above them, the twins laughed. Not the sound of children soothed, the sound of something satisfied. The call did not come as sound. It came as displacement. Birds lifted from the trees all at once, not startled, not fleeing, making room. The river along the eastern slope slowed, its surface smoothing as if steadied by a hand. Even the light shifted, angling inward toward the keep instead of falling away from it. Lyra felt it while carrying water up the inner steps. Her foot missed nothing, yet the weight in her chest changed. She stopped. The bucket slipped from her hand and struck the stone, water spreading outward in a perfect, unhurried ring. The twins cried out, once, then silence. Kyle was already moving. He reached the nursery as the sound finished fading, pushing the door open with a force that bent the hinges but did not break them. The twins stood in the center of the room, not touching, not holding to anything, standing on their own feet, balanced, calm. Between them the air folded, not tore, folded, like fabric recognizing its seam. Lyra arrived breathless. She did not step forward. She knew better now. The fold deepened. Something pressed through, not a body, not yet. A presence testing whether it was welcome. The twins lifted their hands, not in fear, in permission. Kyle felt the keep submit. Every wall, every beam, every hidden line of old protection shifted, not dismantling but reorienting toward them, toward her. Lyra, Kyle said low. They're asking. She swallowed. Not asking, she corrected. Inviting. The fold widened, memory poured through it. Not images, not voices, but weight. The accumulated consequence of choices deferred, corrections avoided, power held too tightly by those who never listened for what answered back. Lyra stepped forward. The air did not resist her. Kyle's breath caught. She knelt, not to the fold, to the twins. I'm here, she said simply. The fold settled, not closing, aligning. What emerged was not a being, but a knowing, a shared recognition between land, blood, and breath that what stood here fit. The twins relaxed. One reached for Lyra's sleeve. The other turned toward Kyle and did something no alpha before him had witnessed. He bowed his head, not out of obedience, out of trust. The fold receded, gone. The keep exhaled for the last time as something unfinished. By dusk, the pack knew. No announcement was made. None was needed. The wolves moved differently around Lyra, not lowering themselves, not circling, but adjusting their distance until the space around her felt intentional. When she spoke, conversations stilled, not because they were commanded to, but because something in her cadence made interruption feel wrong. She did not give orders. She gave placement. Kyle watched from the edge of the hall as the twins slept against her shoulders, heavy and whole. The crown rested untouched on the stone beside his seat. He did not pick it up. He knelt beside her instead. The room went utterly still. This changes everything, he said quietly. Yes, Lyra replied, but it doesn't erase what was good, he said. I won't run from it. She looked at him then, really looked. You won't lead alone anymore, she said. It was not a question. Kyle placed his hand over hers, careful, deliberate. I don't intend to. The twins stirred, settled. Outside, the wolves lay down, not in submission but in rest. The observers did not return. They were no longer needed. The borders held, not by threat but by recognition. The land did not push outward or shrink inward. It simply remained where it belonged, as did they. On the third night after the fold, Lyra stood beside Kyle at the high window. No ceremony, no declaration, just presence. Will they remember this moment? Kyle asked, watching the twins breathe. Lyra nodded. Not as memory. As what, then? As foundation. Kyle exhaled, slow and steady. Then the pack will grow on it, he said. And change, Lyra added. He smiled faintly. And endure. She leaned into his side, not claimed, chosen. Below them the keep slept, not because it was guarded, but because it was finally aligned.